Welcome to episode 17 on the Dan John podcast. I wish I had something clever to say about 17, but the Beatles pretty much took care of that back in the 60s. In the past few weeks, at the gym I train at, we've been having this discussion about where I'm heading with my workouts. As you know, I'm just celebrating the 1-year anniversary of my total hip replacement. And the upside of that, of course, is I'm not in pain. Okay, that'd be number one. But a number two is that not being in chronic pain with a hip has also allowed me to train normally and not have to deal with pain. Well, pain leads to inflammation, leads to body weight gain and all the rest. So like I've said, I'm 35 or 36 pounds down from last year, 11% body fat drop, which probably neither means anything because, you can never really measure as well as you should. But it got me thinking about what Mitch has asked me, Mitch Cook, about where I want to head with my training. And he came out with my new workouts this week, and I love them. I love them. One thing what we do at the end of each workout, folks, is I have an app on my phone called 1 Moment Meditation. And one of the things I do at the end of every workout now, I also do it in the morning, is that I lay down, I press the button, breathe out, and then it gives me the ping. And then I count my breaths for 1 minute, and then it pings. It's odd because I'm going to talk about hard training in just a second, but having that 1 and sometimes 2 minutes, because I float off a little bit, of just getting back to breathing, I think allows me to be a much better driver when I get back on the road and a much better father, grandfather, uncle, and friend. But one of the things we're doing in this upcoming group is that we've added on 2 of the workouts per week, AB system, is this little combination that I love where I do 8 goblet squats with the 24 kilo bell. Then I push the prowler, prowler weight means almost nothing to me, but I go about 20 meters and then I do 8 push-ups. After that, I pop up, I do 8 goblet squats, and then I push the prowler back. I do 8 push-ups, I do 8 goblet squats, push the prowler back. So all the equipment needs I need are, I need 2 kettlebells at the far end of the prowler run and the prowler. But what I love about it, and we've talked about this before, is the goblet squats, I do this, the prowler, I do this, and the push-ups, I do this. Those are 3 level changes. When I used to do this with heart rate monitors, the heart rate always jumps when you get off the ground. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a real fun challenge. 2 of the workouts in the next 6 weeks has me doing that 20 times. Now, if you read my work, you'll realize that that doesn't fit the numbers, but it doesn't matter because these are challenge days. So I'm going to be doing 20 times 8, I think, is 160, which means I'll be doing 160 squats and 160 push-ups, which is a lot of squats and push-ups. And that prowler is going to, make some inroads too. So I'm actually looking forward to these very difficult workouts coming up. Also, one new thing on the site, if you get there, danjohnworkouts.com, is my friend Brian has really upgraded the dashboard. And he's added this little thing on it, kind of a to-do list. But what's nice about it, at first I didn't like it, but then Brian made a change that I like a lot. You just have to do 4 of the 6 things, I think it is there, to get your star for the day, and good for you, give it to your mom. But one of the ones that I like is declutter an area. And it's interesting because Brian and I were talking, and all of a sudden my eyes started doing this in my office. And I realized that it's time for me to declutter my office again. I've been noticing that my writing has not been on par lately. But then my eyes look around today and I realize I'm working in a cluttered office. If your life is cluttered, it's real hard to be focused on anything because there's just all this noise, and I mean noise from the political science phrase where the question is always this. Didn't FDR know the Japanese were going to attack Japan? Well, yeah, he'd probably been, the Japanese were going to attack Hawaii. That would have been a better historical moment. Well, yeah, but here's the thing. He had probably been told that every day for the prior 3 years. If you're ever in a position of leadership, you're always going to have people chirping in your ear telling you, the sky is falling, as a if you ever call offensive plays in football, you're going to have 6 people in your ear constantly telling you. And at the end of the game, you'll hear them say, well, I had the perfect call. Well, 5 other people were telling me the perfect call at the same time too. So clutter is noise. This bottle here, which I'm going to have to recycle, is yelling at me right now. This magazine, which should be in the magazine area, is chirping at me. I have an empty box right here. This empty box should be somewhere else, like in the recycle bin. But they're all barking at me right now, eating away at my ability to write. And until you knock out a couple of books a year, you won't appreciate the importance of decluttering. I think one of the most important things you can do every day is find an area of your life and declutter. Let me tell you, number one, folks, the back seat of your car. Look in the back seat of your car today and clean that up. So let's get on with this week's questions. Okay, we have a question from Mark, and it's good because he's given us some points that really will help me with the answer. I'm 30 years old. I remember being 30, 6'4", 230 pounds, and somewhere in the upper teens in body fat percentage with long torso, if that informs your answer at all. I used to be into powerlifting, but I stopped doing it because the way I was doing it was causing me lower back soreness. Yeah, at 6'4", powerlifting, the gods of powerlifting are probably not, waving you up towards Valhalla. I try my best to avoid rounding, but it seems like the rest of my body is consistently stronger than my back core, which leads me to rounding somewhat with any appreciable weight or intensity. To combat this discomfort, I basically cut all squats other than pistols or light goblets and took up deadlifting with the raised handles of the trap bar only. The higher handles allow me to really lock my upper back before pulling, which seems to help a bunch with the lower back. I told myself this was just what I had to do because of my height. However, as my poundage in the trap bar goes up, mid 400s currently, the soreness is coming back with even very slight rounding. I'm done trying to train around this. I don't want a touchy lower back. There's some wisdom there. I want a massively strong one that is the last thing to give out. How would you recommend training if this is my main objective? Well, I got to tell you, Mark, I don't know how much you read my work, but I've been telling people for years that the deadlift the barbell is on the ground because of the metallurgy in the 1930s. That's the only reason. There's no scientific reason for the barbell to be right there on my shin, except that's where it is. So I recommend with people all the time to use the rack or platforms or whatever you have in your gym, boxes, to put the bar either 1 inch above your knee, which, by the way, in my gym is 31 inches. It's at the 31 setting, or 1 inch below the knee if you're built for that. But that's just part one. So rack deadlifts might be the answer for you. And even the trap bar might be too low for you at 6'4". So part one would be, just adopt the fact that rack deadlifts might be better for taller guys. When I work with basketball players or even football players now, football players, when I first started working with football players, they were, the barbell wasn't that low, but now it just seems like American football. They just get taller, and taller when you look at pictures of, some of the tight ends in the league being up, for my European listeners, 2 meters tall. And that's just almost the norm now, 6'6", 6'7". The next thing is, I have a small concern with you, not just with you, but where we've gotten in our weightlifting world now. But in the 1960s, round back lifting was considered a normal part of training. It's made a big return with the strongmen. The strongmen will tell you, if you're going to pick up those heavy balls, those concrete balls they lift, you can't do it like you're trying to snatch and clean and jerk a world record. You have to lift with a round back. I wouldn't tell you to go all in on this, but it seems to me, as I'm just hearing you, that you might lack what we would call the anaconda strength or the inner tube pressure here to counter the stress of the load. If you're using a massive belt to hold everything in, that might be an indicator that I wouldn't say you're not cheating. This isn't taxes and a morality question, but you might be cheating your inner core, the inner tube strength, that this kind of strength that you need. Usually, I wouldn't recommend sandbags immediately, but the sandbag family of exercises tend to really help build that up. The Zercher squat and the Zercher deadlift, where you're holding the bars there. The goblet squat, which you're already doing, is basically an anaconda strength exercise. Though you might even want to think about, when you're in the bottom, doing a few curls just to practice holding that position tight. Without seeing your technique, I'm a little blind here, but I think you're doing something that's quite wise in your 30s. You're looking at the whole thing and saying, this is what I want from weightlifting. Here's the sports of weightlifting. Here's what people say they're doing online. But I like the fact that you're going in and pulling out, picking and choosing what works for you. To me, that is the difference, the masterful difference between just the followers and the leaders. I'm in an interesting conversation with the famous European track coaches. We go and we're both talking about how we would toss out certain exercises or adapt the exercise so much from a sport like Olympic lifting that an Olympic lifter would look at it and say, that's kind of like a snatch. And well, it is a snatch, but it's a snatch developed for a discus thrower or a shot putter. So it's perfectly fine for you to do what you need to do. I would think about training round bear hug work, maybe some Bulgarian goat bag swings. Those are swings where you're holding a weight here. Maybe even look into the Zercher family of lifts. But I'm very comfortable with you making those decisions in the weight room. Okay, we have a question from Reese. I have stopped playing rugby recently due to family commitments. So I was wondering, what would be the best form of training with no athletic goal in mind, bar lifting heavy and looking good naked? And to add to this, any training program recommendations? Yeah, Reese, go to Dan John Workouts, go to the park bench generator, fill in the information and do that. You are literally the client I put that whole site together for. We have to thank Brian for doing it. But the idea with that is to get reasonably stronger over time, take care of some hypertrophy work, take care of some mobility work, do some flexibility. And when you sum all those together, you look good naked. It's that simple, Reese. We have a question from Peter. First question, how do you measure body fat percentage? Well, I don't. I hire people to do that for me. But the one I'm using now over at Epic Fitness is IndoBody or something like that. And you have to clean your feet off, and you have to hold your thumbs like this wide. I've done water testing 2 or 3 times. I can remember clearly twice at Skyline and once at Utah State. So that would be 3, and maybe 1 other time. I've tried some of the other scans, and they're all fine. Some are pretty expensive, and I have a hard. I still think a better measurement is your waistline in centimeters, but just measure the same place every time. And I agree with what the real good fat loss experts like Josh Hillis will say. It's clothes, and it's the look. If I'm at 8% body fat and I look like I just got out of a war zone, that might not be a good look for me. That's why I'm a big fan of those. If you can see certain things, Greg O'Gallagher uses the Adonis line, which is that it's like when your obliques make that V. Everybody has their own. Everybody in the industry tends to have that own little visionary thing. With my genetic background, I'm probably not going to have great 6-pack. So for me, I focus on how many chins do I have in a picture, what my belt is, and those kinds of things. But IndoBody at Epic Fitness. Second question. This is about open-end versus closed-end training and exercise. Peter then goes on to explain what he means. With closed-end, I mean the set task has an end that can be measured. That is, a distance is known, or the number of reps is known before the training set starts. Open-end is typically as many as far as possible until failure. I'm not a big fan of that, or as many reps as possible within a given time frame. Open-end training play with the willpower and ability to fight when it gets tough, and neural fatigue needs to be taken care of with high attention to recovery between sessions. In what situations do you think open-end versus closed-end training can work? You see, I actually think there's a third option that you're missing, and it's a system that you'll see in my 30/30 for 30 workouts, 30 for 30 for 30 workouts. It's where you give 30 seconds and someone says, how many reps should you do? And I say, well, get some reps in. And Steve Ledbetter has this great little word called ish. He says 8-ish. How many reps should I do? 8-ish, 5-ish. And to me, that's a third system here, which I actually think is better for your adult clients. Hi, I'm Dan John. I'm 62. I just babysat my grandkids last night, and then this morning I wake up and I've got a problem at the university, and I got a crappy commute to the gym, and I get there, and the workout calls for 8 sets of 8 with a world record, and really what I'm going to get out of that workout is 8-ish, 5-ish. I'm just going to kind of but I'm still in the gym. I'm still taking care of business. I'm still swinging away. But to get to your actual question, without my because I can't help myself make it better, the closed system has great value because you can measure things over time. For example, that's why I'm such a big fan of the basic DeLorme system. We usually summarize it as 3 sets of 8. Let's just stick with that. 3 sets of 8 with 1 minute rest between sets 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. Boom. The nice thing about saying 3 sets of 8 with a minute rest is that if load goes up, we can assume good things happen. If you're doing clean grip snatches, 3 sets of 8, and you were at 95, and then you moved to 115, and now you're at 155, and those 3 sets of 8, those 24 reps are snappy, clean, fast, explosive. I'm going to stand back and say, yeah, we're ready. We are ready for track season, or you trying to knock somebody down in American football or rugby. So that's the best part of what you define as closed end, is that we can stand back and say, okay, something good has happened. Now let's see if that translates to the field of play or to life itself. With open end, and we see this with any kind of as many reps as possible stuff, is that very quickly people start chasing the number versus the quality of the movement. And that's my huge knock on that stuff, is, you're going to go to momentary failure, but the 30 reps before that were horrific. And there are exercises that we call them self-limiting, and I'd much rather see you do a training program of open-end with self-limiting. The most classic self-limiting exercise was something we did every day in junior high, and we had this balance beam that was a big kind of a zigzag, okay? And we, in part of our obstacle course, and they were very specific about this, and it was also, we self-regulated this with each other, is you were supposed to go as fast as you could on it, but if you fell off, you had to go back and start again. Now, I noticed even back then that the kids who were, and I'm a terrible person by saying this, but like the stoners didn't really care about it. But those of us who moved on in life to to advanced sports and professional careers, that tiny bit of discipline was a game changer for us. So you would get to almost to the total end of the zigzag and fall off. Your discipline in going back to start and doing it again was great. And here's how you know you failed, is because you fell off. Jump rope is self-limiting. If it catches on your feet, you got to start again. I'm a big fan of open end with self-limiting exercises. I would say if you're going to do as many reps as possible with the overhead squat, well, it's going to be self-limiting because that bar is going to start. If you start doing weird movements with your shoulder, the bar is going to come off. If you start, hitching in your hips, the bar is going to fall off. My knock on some of this stuff you've seen in the last 20 years, this, this warrior mentality of, I'm going to make more reps than you. The quality of reps are so bad. So I gave you 3 answers here. So I would say with your definition of the close end, I think there's great value in that as a coach measuring how we're going to help you perform out in the field of play or the real world. Open end, I think there's some great wisdom if you're doing self-limiting exercises, but be very careful if you're going to do something like push-ups, because the quality of the push-ups, if it goes south and you start doing all that stuff, you're just setting yourself up for more shoulder problems. I also want to give you my option where we use Steve's ish term. Sometimes there's a great value just to say, 5, 10, whatever you get in. All 3 have value, obviously, but it's going to have to be appropriate to the person you're working with. Jim asks a very good question. I know you are a big proponent of Phil Maffetone's heart rate training zones. This will be interesting. Tiff and I have been married 32 years. I was doing Maffetone work before I married Tiff. That's how long I've been influenced by Phil Maffetone. I know since the book Natural Born Heroes came out, where McDougall went and found, I know that Maffetone has gotten to be very popular, and deservedly so. He was most famous for his work with triathletes, but now he's become just, very popular again. Maffetone's insight on food, he does this 2-week test where you drop out basically all simple carbs. That's only the beginning on his nutrition work. His training insights are very good too. Everything about his original book from 86, 87, Everybody's an Athlete, have held true through my entire career. I'm amazed how often I come back to his work and go, you knew this. Why did you fall away from it? Do you recommend staying within the MAF zone, the Maffetone zone, while doing park bench workouts? You know what? That'd be a great way to do it. So the Maffetone numbers of this, folks, just so everybody knows, there is no science behind the 220 minus age number. That was, I believe, and I think I'm right on this, that was the inventor of the universal gyms used that number for his wall charts, and that's just where the number came from. I like Maffetone's numbers better. Basically, there's 2 numbers. So you take 180 and you minus your age, and that is the top end of where you want your heart rate in a workout, most workouts. And then you take 160 minus your age, and that's where you want to get going again. So if you're, and it's interesting because we've just posted an article on this in Dan John Workouts where we give you these numbers. So it's very simple. I mean, if you're 40 years old, 180 minus 40 is 140. So you want your heart rate beepers between 120 and 140. And if you go over 140, ease up. If you go under 120, get back going again. It's interesting now. My numbers are 118 and 98. So I can set my heart rate. I have a heart rate that ties into my iPhone, and I have 2 beepers on this. And I got to tell you from the heart, folks, it is a little sad when you have to adjust that every year. And I can work out between those 2 beepers. For me to get my heart rate over 118 is quite easy. For me to, so those beeps seem to be a little different. Yes, you can. So to get to the answer, you can very much do the heart rate monitor doing the park bench workouts. One of the things you're going to find, though, when you get to the strength part of those workouts, you probably won't find your heart rate. A set of 8 with a goblet squat might not drive that heart rate over the target number at all. But Jim, if don't mind me walking with you, you might want to measure how quick that number comes down to that 160 minus your age number to get back going. You might find you might not be resting enough, which is very common, or you're resting way too much. So the only issue with that is you do have to have a heart rate monitor on. And I know there's so many more options now. It's much better than it used to be. When I first used heart rate monitors back in the, it had been late 80s, early 90s, they were well into the $400. They were very expensive, and they were very cumbersome. And they had a wire that gave you the number. So you had this thing on your chest and then a wire down to your wrist and then this massive wristwatch. So you couldn't use kettlebell because it would break the wristwatch. You were constantly getting bundled up. So it was, but now you guys have so many more options. I mean, it's stunning. I still don't like the watch ones. I don't, when I lift weights, I don't think you should have rings on at all. In case if you hurt that finger with a ring on, you have to go to the emergency room and get that thing cut off immediately. I don't like watches on wrists while we're training because stuff will hit and break that very expensive watch. This is a good question. This is the kind of thing, Jim, that really kind of opens my thinking up too. And it would be an interesting thing now we would need some people to help us, but to get some feedback on this idea of using a heart rate monitor doing the park bench workouts. Okay, we have a question from Shaquille. Hi, I just finished reading Can You Go? That makes me, Shaquille, you now my favorite person in the world. And let me just say, I hope there's praise here. What an absolutely wonderful read. I blush. Thank you. I have grown as a coach from that book, and I hope so. And I hope if you can also read Now What in 40 Years, you can kind of see where I'm heading as a coach to help you. Thank you. What I wanted to ask was if I should be incorporating any sort of mobility work, perhaps stretching of the tonic muscles, in between work sets of exercises in the workouts generated on this site, or should I strictly follow what the site tells me to do? I think you know where this is going. Honestly, after reading Can You Go, I feel like I can answer this myself, and the answer is yes. I am more so curious if there's any programming tips y'all recommended, or should I just make sure to get a good stretch in between sets per my discretion? Well, there's a couple ways to go on this. First, I've moved from doing just stretches in between, and this is my evolution, Shaquille. But I think when I first started combining the hypertrophy movements, I was combining them with stretches. Now I combine the hypertrophy movement with mobility movement, and I take those from basically Tim Anderson's original strength. Now, when he was getting me ready, he was supporting me getting ready for that weightlifting meet about a year or two ago. We were doing, I would do a set of snatches, and then I would do a variation of the 6-point rock, where instead of having my hands here in the push-up position, I push my hands way out, more like that downward dog position. And so I was doing rocks with stretched out shoulders between sets of snatches, sets of squats, basic 6-point rocks or the nods. So for me, and one small point you might miss, Shaquille, is that most of the time in the weight room, when I'm doing things, I'm standing. And most of the time when I'm doing original strength, I'm on the ground. So I'm getting that level change work in naturally. So yes, absolutely. Now, what we could do, and maybe this is a little programming change I could just add later, is we could do maybe another little adjustment on the site for, we could call it a hypertrophy mobility workout or something like that, where you do just go through and mix those up. I have a couple programs, and I'll do my best to get these right out to Brian. I think I call them Hypertrophy A, and I think Conditioning in 10 Moves is already on the site, where, Shaquille, you'll be able to see how we've done this historically lots and lots of ways. We have one workout called Winner, Winner, Chicken Dinner, which is basically just flipping back and forth between hypertrophy movements, it's a tough workout. It's one arm press, stretch, a pull up, a TRX, a hip flexor stretch, back, and you just keep swimming through that over and over and over. But boy, when you finish that workout, you feel like you really want to go out in public because your shoulders and your guns are just pumped, and you look good, you feel good. So yes, the answer is yes. Sprinkle them in freely, or I think at the end of the book there are some ideas at the end of the book that will help supplement that for you. Okay, thank you, Shaquille. That was a good question. Alex writes a good question. The most recent podcast with Pat Flynn revolved around the importance of community. This is a very interesting topic that our society seems to struggle with. Well, yeah. My wife and I are entering our third and final year in our new state, and we are looking to move out west to another state. My question is, how does one build that community when they have moved away from friends and family? Well, Alex, I can only tell you my experience. It's an interesting one. When Tiff and I moved to San Francisco, that was tough, man. My daughter graduated from. I had a daughter graduate from junior college, a daughter graduate from high school. We had to leave our children's home and sell it, and then uproot in a 8-day period, drive to California. Tiff and I famously had no music on, and because we had to drive, there was no music on. We drove for 4 hours before either one of us spoke. That's when you know you've been under pressure. We drove for 4 hours across the desert before one of us said, well, now what? Been there. Within about 6 months of being in California, I invited our friends over and family members over to have a practice Thanksgiving, and it was so much fun. We did it in our apartment complex had this gathering room, and 75 people showed up. And my brother Gary, who's always in my stories, said to me, "You've been here 6 months and you have more friends than I do." And he asked me why. Well, I didn't have the heart to say what I really wanted to say to Gary about him. But you can imagine what I was thinking. And then I thought about it. I go, well, how do I do it? Well, I think because I take community very seriously, Alex. If you go on to our site here, you have a thing called the Coyote Point Kettlebell Club. I hold those weekly workouts were very important to me. I met, if I could say, dozens of people, and with one exception, everybody was delightful. And it's interesting, the one exception was a kettlebell expert from San Francisco who claimed to have learned nothing in a 1-hour workout with people from all walks of life. I found that fascinating, how you could actually be with a master kettlebell instructor, several other kettlebell instructors, firefighters, Vietnam veterans, and gymnasts, and not learn a single thing. I don't think that reflected on us. The other way, of course, is through the natural communal ways. Sports, becoming a sports fan is huge. I meet a lot of people at sporting events. Of course, if you have a denomination, going to church is huge. The other thing, and I think this is really underappreciated, is raise your hand and volunteer. So when I moved to Burlingame, for example, one of the first things I did, I was working out one day and I saw this whole group of shot putters over there training. I walked over, and as I walked over, the coach said, "Oh my God, it's Dan John." Now, listen, you probably won't have that happen to you because your name is Alex. But it turned out that there was also a famous kettlebell gym in Burlingame, and I went and trained at the park with them. There was also another famous group of kettlebellers over in Half Moon Bay, and I went and trained with them. And then there was a gym opening just south of me that I went and visited. So, Alex, it reminds me of what I learned from Earl Nightingale back in 1985. This husband and wife from Minnesota moved down to Florida, and they enjoyed it very much. And after about 3 months, they put a for sale. The husband enjoyed it. They put a for sale sign up in the door, and someone else came by and said to the husband, he goes, "I thought you loved it here." He goes, "I do. Well, why are you moving? He goes, my wife can't stand it. Why? She has no friends. And the other guy said, why doesn't she have any friends? I don't know. She's been sitting in her house waiting for people to come by. I've always taken that as a real insight, about friends. On Monday night here, we're going to have Alex. We're going to have, we call it Christmas Ad, and I've mentioned it before here. In fact, by the time this posts, it'll be already happened. But we invent parties for people to come by, and we just keep our arms open and invite people in. And generally, that's how you make the world a better place. So the thing is, if you sit in your house and you wait for friends to come by, it's not going to happen. It's up to you, Alex. You got to go out and you got to make the world a better place. Question from Lee, and this will be an interesting one. I swim 5 to 6 days a week. A must for maintaining and improving my technique. I also strength train with goals in deadlift, squat, bench press, shoulder press, and pull-ups. Recently, the Olympic lifts have entered my life, and they are very technical, so you have to practice them often, right? I can train twice a day, Monday through Friday, possibly twice, even Saturdays. Sundays are my rest day. Any advice how to combine this? Swim, power lift, shoulder press and pull-ups. You're adding the Olympic lifts. How many rabbits do you want to chase? Lee, I don't know how you're going to combine it. I've never seen someone combine powerlifting, Olympic lifting, shoulder press and pull-ups with daily swimming, basically. It's going to be tough. We always use the phrase, if you're chasing 2 rabbits, you're going to go home hungry, and you're chasing 4 or 5, as I can see. I'm not sure how you're going to do it. The fact that you can train twice a day is amazing, but something's going to have to give. It is interesting, though, if I was going to pick a cardiovascular thing to do with what you want, swimming would have been my choice. But this is going to be difficult. If you really want to Olympic lift, I would get rid of the power lifts, the shoulder press, and the pull-ups for a while and learn the Olympic lifts. Take, 16 to 24 weeks of practicing the Olympic lifts. I think you ought to be able, and this isn't completely true for everybody, but if you're male, you should be able to snatch body weight as a given and clean and jerk 20 pounds at least over body weight, 10 kilos as a given fairly soon in your career. It took me, the first time I saw someone live snatch, from that day, it took me 3 weeks to snatch body weight. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying I also had a really good coach, Dick Nottmeyer. But, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to take the Olympics very seriously, which means everything else has to go out the door for a while. Now, if you email me back and you say, well, I want to Olympic lift and I want to swim 5 days a week, but I also want to do 25 pull-ups and I also want to compete as a power lifter, I personally don't have an answer for that. I mean, I think something has to give here. And I would suggest if you are going to do the Olympic lifts, push everything else to the side. You're going to be able to come back to the deadlift, squat, and bench press very quickly. That's not going to go out of you're not going to forget how to do that. So, but sometimes, Lee, we have to make choices. And it's odd to say that because the one thing people hate when I coach them is I tell them they have to make choices. Okay, we have an email from David. A few months ago, I left my regular standard gym and joined a kettlebell gym. That's nice to see that. I'm glad to see the kettlebell gyms are still around. I train 3 times a week doing a mixture of kettlebell programs, including pentathlons, long cycle, snatch circuits. For those of you who don't know, the long cycle is the kettlebell sport style of doing things. And also do pull-ups, squats, bench press, and farmer carries. Bench press at a kettlebell gym. Okay. I've also been injury-free since I started. I typically get niggles that stop me from training, and my shoulder mobility has returned after months of impingement issues. My aim is to burn fat and to also get muscle growth and life longevity. Does the above list of exercises with appropriate diet support this, or should I also perform other exercises that a standard gym program would promote? Well, You're doing great, especially the fact that you said appropriate diet. David, you're doing fine. Um, if you want to, well, burn fat is a strange word, but that's I just got off of I don't know, about 5 days of zero carbing. Um, and what I'm going to start doing, David, is I'm going to have a monthly tweak. 1 month it'll be zero carb for 4 or 5 days, and the next month will be the fast mimicking diet that I've talked about quite a bit. Um, the the reason I do that is I'm trying to remind, well, not myself, but my body about how to adapt to certain things. At my age, I want to make sure that I'm, focusing on longevity, which is the fast mimicking diet, but I also want to make sure that I have these little bouts where I attack body fat. You attack body fat in the kitchen. Fat burning is a very difficult thing to work. You're looking for post-exercise burn, and really, with Josh Hillis has taught me that just doing the strength lifts work just as well as being a sweaty mess of goo at the end of the workout. But from what I can see, you're doing just fine. If you're doing long cycle pentathlons and all the rest, you're doing just fine. Okay, and good luck. And let me know how this goes. I'd be interested. Erica has asked us a question, and as I was looking these questions over, this was the question that caused me the most concern. In August, I want to be as competitive as possible in the La Luz Trail Run. This is a 9-mile run, which consists of 1.8 miles of paved road and 7.2 miles of dirt with a 12% grade. It starts in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains in Albuquerque, and she spelled it correctly, and finishes at an altitude of almost 11,000 feet, which is over 4,000 of elevation gain. Here's the thing. Currently, I'm not engaged in a running program, although I was running consistently about 2 years ago, never longer than 3 miles. I stopped running because it was killing my knees and because I really developed an affinity for strength training. And that killing my knees thing is the issue. Erica, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is maybe hire yourself a local high school track coach and pay them, and they'll love you for it. Get a $100 bill and go, here, will you help me? And have someone look at your running technique. If this is killing your knees, there's a couple things. The way shoes have been made in the last 30, 40 years, with all the cushion on shoes, very often people are literally jamming into every run. You should be running over your feet, not into your feet on the ground. And might be something as simple as the A and the A skip drills that might help you. It could be technical. And before I even want you to even think about training for it, get your technique looked at. And it's an interesting thing. Most people will take swimming lessons in their life. Very few people will take running lessons. I've taken running lessons. We did a program back here in the 80s. Whatever what happened to that guy. He was really a good coach. And when you start practicing running correctly, amazing things happen. A, you get much faster, and B, it stops hurting so much. So the first thing I want to recommend to you is give a high school coach a $100 bill and say, will you help me? For one thing, the high school coach will pass out and you'll have to revive them. And the second thing is you might find out your technique has issues. Moving on to the question. I work out 6 days a week at this awesome gym with an owner who cites you as a mentor. And it's Slade Jones. You make sure you give Slade my best. That's really nice. Slade has come here to the Institute and trained with me a few times, and he's a good and decent man. We do a lot of carries, different types of squatting and deadlifts, kettlebell work, etc. As for cardio, we do a lot of interval work and sprint type stuff, but I haven't really pushed myself beyond a couple of miles in at least a year. I'm 34 if that's relevant. Any advice, training tips, or words of wisdom would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your podcast. Your expertise is invaluable. Well, there's some competing points here. A, you want to be competitive as possible in this race, but running kills your knees. To me, I see those two things as kind of bouncing into each other a little bit. Having said that, I always support performance goals. I'm wondering if running up this race might not be a problem for you, but running down after is going to kill your wheels. Because remember that we have a marathon here every year called the Deseret News Marathon, and it often is cited as one of the most difficult marathons in the world. And the reason is completely counterintuitive if you don't know anything about running. The reason it's so tough is that the first 10 miles are downhill. And what happens is when people get to the flat, they notice very often that their legs are gone because of those constant isometric hits of running downhill. It's really hard on the quads, and for many people, it's really hard on the knees. So Erica, I support you 100% on this thing, but first off, let's get your technique looked at. Number two, let's have you maybe walk this thing one time and get a sense of just do the walk. It'll take you, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours, whatever. Just walk this race and get a sense of things, and then maybe get back to me. But let's look at your technique first. Let's have you walk the race, and then obviously you're going to have to run to get ready to be as competitive as possible. But at your age, which is 34, I don't want you beating those knees up so that when you're 44, all you do is regret this decision. We have a question from Marius. I am 33 years old and I work in marketing. Marketing sounds like a nice town. And train at home with kettlebells. That was an attempt at humor. I am thinking about making a career change and becoming a strength coach, personal trainer for people over 35 or plus 50. By the way, a great niche area. For some years, in my evenings and weekends, I study books, videos, and other resources on strength, sports science, and related subjects. I just love to learn about the field of strength training. Boy, I tell you, if you want to be in the field, you got to love it. I mean, you really do. I overuse the word passion a little bit, and I know that. But passion, of course, comes from the root to suffer. And I am willing to suffer for my love for strength training. So in other words, it's a good start to read that. Do you think it is still possible at this age, dude, you're killing me here, to become a fairly good trainer? Well, of course. Absolutely. Some of the best teachers I've ever been around didn't start off in teaching. They start off in the military or business, but they had a passion for English or whatever and come back in the classroom and come back and teach. They're wonderful because their real life experience blesses the classroom. So yeah, I think it's really helpful to have done other things. And this is just a real side point here, Marius, but the bulk of being a personal trainer has very little to do with strength and conditioning. It's running a business. It's recruiting new clients. It's keeping clients. It's advertising. It's accounting and things like that. What hurts most people in the personal training business is their lack of business skills. You're coming in from marketing, so you're going to have this massive advantage that I don't have. My friend Brian will tell you my marketing skills, which are zero. And I hear that around the house with my daughters. My daughters make fun of the things I do because I'm so bad at all these things. And I'm proud of that in an odd way. How should I approach this from a professional credential standpoint? What do I need? Well, Marius, I talk about this a lot. Maybe not as much as I should, but I think you need to be certified in something. It might be worth your time to do the FitRanks cert. It's FitRanks, FITRANX. It's a weekend cert. They do everything. They do calisthenics. They do weightlifting. They do kettlebells. They do jump rope. They do all kinds of cardio things. The coaching is very good, but they also have a system called FitRanks, where they have male and female, 3 different age groups, and then 8 different levels for each. Well, to me, that's a nice little cert. I do the hardstyle kettlebell cert, the 1-day cert where we go over swing, goblet squat, Turkish get-up. That might be something. I'm a big fan of John Berardi's precision nutrition because you're going to need to understand the weightlifting stuff and how to coach it, but you're also going to need to have some background in nutrition. I'm not telling you to be a nutritionist, and really it's outside of our wheelhouse, but that doesn't matter because you're constantly going to be bombarded with nutrition questions. And I mean constantly. I would do some work in the areas of recovery, and I don't know how you can do that, but either read up on sleep. Fortunately, with my work with the military, I actually work with sleep specialists. So when people question my knowledge of recovery, I'm always like, dude, I'm just quoting somebody else who has postdocs and is a medical doctor who specializes in this. This is the guy I had breakfast with. That's all. But a cert of some kind I think is helpful. Precision nutrition I think is helpful, or another nutrition program. But I just at the top of my head I don't know of any others. And then some level of understanding of recovery and things like that. Just so you can have conversations with your people. The business side is going to be huge. You got marketing. But I would say what I do for the accounting side is I hire an accountant. I have an accountant who's very good and understands. I have real issues with my accounting because I get things like royalties and I have international stuff and I have. So you need. I would suggest hiring a professional to do that. My accountant Mont is just. I mean, I can call him up right now and say, "Am I right or wrong on this?" I'll get a clear, smart answer. Not just taxes. Taxes are an issue, but with everything else. At my age, for example, I had to make the Social Security decision, and he was very clear about what to do. I don't know if Social Security is going to be around much longer, but at least we have a clear idea what to do. He asked the next question is, do you know someone who has made this leap to strength training from an unrelated field? Yeah, practically everyone I know has. Some of the best strength trainers I know. My friend Mike Warren Brown, he has an MBA. My other friend Erica, she comes from a counseling background, went into personal training for a while, and now is back in counseling. But it's interesting because personal training is counseling, so that'll help you a little bit. How should I go about earning a sufficient level of strength in kettlebells, barbells, and bodyweight modalities to be able to perform what I preach? Well, it kind of depends on your clientele, Marius. I didn't hire Ben Fogel and Mitch and Madison as my personal trainers because they're stronger than me. I hired them because of the quality of their coaching. So, I'm a big engine and I can press a lot and do these other things. No one cares. Because if I'm giving you my money, Marius, to coach me, I don't care about how you look. I care about how I look. And it's the biggest problem I have when I work with young personal trainers. They'll show up very often in inappropriate clothes to highlight their body. And I'm talking about inappropriate clothes. It's not inappropriate, but it's all about their body and their workouts. And they're not good personal trainers, and they don't last long. You probably should be able to easily pass a cert of some kind. You should be able to have a basic understanding of the lifts. But as for numbers, don't worry too much about it. I mean, obviously, I'd like you to have a body weight bench press and be able to do some pull-ups and be able to do an overhead squat, a front squat, a goblet squat, because that's just good for you. But as for those numbers, don't worry too much about it. Brian, who runs the site, and myself, we both went through a very interesting thing that we both did. It's kind of fun to think about. We volunteered at high schools. Now, I was a teacher there, and I was trying to get my workouts in, and I had the weight room. I had the weight room at Judge Memorial open in the afternoon. I would say probably 17 years. I I wouldn't say 5 days a week because that would be hyperbole, but I would say three through the entire time, and often five. And very often I'd come in on Saturdays because kids would want to work out. I got to thank those kids because I wouldn't say they were my guinea pigs, but they allowed me to help them, which really improved my coaching. And really, all coaching is sometimes, well, coaching by definition is a coach is a vehicle with wheels on it that takes you from here to there. But the more you coach, the smoother that route becomes, and the clearer that those tires stay in the ruts better. Okay, and I have to thank Brian for reminding me about this. But volunteering at a high school or even at a community center to help out might be a great way for you to figure out your skill set and see your own gaps. And boy, if there's a thing in coaching that's important, is gaps. You got to find out your gaps. I talk about gaps a lot. If you're doing push, pull, hinge, that's all you're doing, and you're not doing an authentic squat and loaded carries, I'll tell you to do goblet squats and farmer walks, and in a couple of weeks, you make the best progress. It's because you had gaps. If you're up to standard in 10 things, but not in this, by pushing you up the standard on this is going to help everything else. When you coach, you're going to find out where your gaps are. Generally, when I work with people, their gaps are in the ballistic lifts, the snatch, the clean, the kettlebell swing, the kettlebell snatch. And there's a gap there. And so once we fill that gap, all of a sudden everything else starts to come out well. Good luck to you on this, and keep us informed. Well, this brings us to the end of session 17. It's going quickly. I'm very happy. I'm very proud when something isn't one-off in my career. I like it when those numbers start to pile up. I have that weekly wandering weights, and we're sneaking up on we're in the hundreds, and the sword and the stone work I do, it's in the hundreds. And now that we're at 17, we're closing in on 20. And it's nice because when we do get to 20 this year, we'll be in the new year. And as we are on the holiest times of the year for many of our listeners, and as we come to a new year, it's going to be an Olympic year, and here in the United States, an election year. And I just want all my listeners to know that I wish them the very best of these times. And if you had a tough 2019, which in many ways I did, it was, to quote Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The nice thing about the new year is that Janus, the January, the god who head looks one way and head looks the other. Whenever I come to January, I always remind myself to look backwards and to look forwards at the same time. I'd like you to join with me this year on a little thing that I do where I take out a piece of paper and I write out my best and worst list. And what I do every year by doing that, it gives me a reminder about how great things are in my life and a reminder about how tenuous life can be. So I know I speak with my entire extended family here in Utah and all my friends and family in wishing you the very best of the new year and this holiday season. God bless us all.